All right, and welcome back to Balance Patch here in Boston, Mass. This is round 3 of the December Challenge, and I'm Jake, joined by my lovely friend June, and we have a match between Brian McQueen and Luke Legger. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Leger, not sure.
Yep.
Luke L.
Either way, a very exciting matchup for us, and I think we're going to be starting with Brian's team, taking a look at it first. Some Pokemon that we've already seen on stream today, but used in a very different way, and starting off with, a couple of very strong duos in the Indeedee Delphox and the Excadrill and Tyranitar.
The Sand Brothers and the Psy-Spam Sisters. We have, that Psy-Spam mode, we have the Tyranitar Excadrill Sand mode, and then we have two wonderful support Pokemon in Sneasler, who also combos with the Psychic Terrain, or no, I apologize, that's White Herb, not Psychic Seed on Burton. I apologize. With Sneasler as a support and Corviknight, actually not a support, that poke up Power Trip set that I believe Nils Dunlop used.
Yes.
In some European tournament. I don't think it was EYC.
No, he used it to win a regional over there.
That sounds correct.
I think it was Lille. It was Lille.
Yep.
That he went.
So a really cool spin on that team. I don't think exactly the same, but reminiscent of it.
Yeah, it has 4 or 3 of the same Pokemon. Niels was using the male Indeedee, which is a little bit faster, a little bit more offensive typically. But seeing what's on the other side of this matchup, I'm really excited to see Luke's team and the counterplay that he has to a lot of the things that Brian is trying to do. The first thing that I'm looking at once we transition over to Luke's open team sheet is that Rillaboom. Mm-hmm. That Pokemon just by itself operates as a very strong check to at least the Indeedee and the Sand mode that Brian might want to go for. This Milotic as well, there really aren't ways to drop stats from Brian's side, but Milotic, just a very strong defensive Pokemon that can take a lot of hits and dish back a ton of damage to those 3 water weaknesses.
Yeah, as you said, that Rillaboom being a pretty good natural check to the 2 styles of this team. And I think Corviknight is a standout that kind of goes against what you said. It has a really good time in this matchup. But we're going to see the leads of Electabuzz and Sneasler from Luke's side. And on Brian's side, the Psy-Spam Sisters, it is the Diva itself, Delphox and Indeedee.
I do love that it is the Psy-Spam Sisters that we are seeing on the field right now. Very interested to see, though, the speed interactions here between some of these Pokemon. Of course, naturally, both of Luke's Pokemon are faster than the 2 on Brian's side, but it really depends on how they're trained coming into this matchup, and that's really going to be important here in this first turn, as, yes, this Indeedee on Brian's side is packing Trick Room, but no one else on the team really wants Trick Room set up. It's a team that wants to go pretty quick for the most part, so I would imagine Brian really just going to try to ride out with whatever damage this Delphox can do right here and right now.
Yeah, and on Luke's side, that Sneasler not carrying Fake Out, so it's not like a Fake Out into Indeedee or Delphox and switch in Rillaboom is a play here, but bringing in Rillaboom is certainly on the table nonetheless. In order to get this Grassy Seed up, get that speed up, and throw out a Dire Claw and maybe try to get a sleep here, wouldn't be shocked to have seen Brian click a Fire-type move, possibly expecting that Rillaboom to come in, but, I mean, a Psychic Attack into Sneasler nonetheless is going to be able to take it out in one hit if he goes for that as well.
Yeah, always a difficult decision to make though on this turn, because you have this Sneasler that is going to Terrastalize immediately into that Stellar type and threatens a Throat Chop into both of these 2 Psychic types on the other side of the field. So, Brian may feel inclined to click this Follow Me that we're going to see right here. I'm curious to see how well this Indeedee is going to take a Terra Stellar Throat Chop from Sneasler. But this Delphox will be able to attack unabated this turn after its friend Indeedee takes that honestly a lot better than I expected.
Yeah, so taking that like a champ, honestly, as Heat Wave does come out onto Rillaboom, doing a critical hit to that Sneasler, putting it in range of another Heat Wave a lot better. But because, let's be honest, any Psychic type attack is dropping Sneasler down back into its Pokeball. And a Fake Out is now on the table for Luke. So maybe wanting to get that Fake Out on to the Delphox to prevent damage, maybe into the Indeedee to prevent a Follow Me. But either way, Indeedee took that Throat Chop like a champ, and now the Terra Stellar Boost is no longer on the table for the Throat Chop. I believe a Dire Claw would do pretty similar amounts of damage.
I think it'd be.
It's not
Correct me if
equal
I'm wrong.
because
I believe it's the exact same because it would be the throat chop gets the 2x boost from being super effective. Terastallizing into a same type as you are turns the stab bonus into ×2. I believe it's the same power because they're both base 80.
the stellar boost into the dark move is what you're not accounting for.
The stellar boost in the dark move is lower, but now that the stellar boost has gone away,
yes,
now they're the same base power.
now they would be the same.
Yes.
So Rillaboom going for a fake out into the Delphox here is just going to be protected as we see a Dire Claw from Sneasler go into that Corviknight, which is not affected. So a free turn for Brian here, getting a little bit of recovery on all Pokemon touching the ground. No more fake out on the table, and Brian's in a pretty good spot to start pressuring setup with this Corviknight, and can just bring Indeedee back in to set up that Psychic Seed. I mean, it's not important right here because obviously the Rillaboom and the Sneasler are physical attackers, but could get it up for the future. Probably just going to want to get up a bulk up here, though.
Yeah, for Brian, the Corviknight is in the exact right position it wants to be in. You've got two Pokemon that neither of them hit it really hard at all. Of course, the Terrastellar Close Combat, I'm very curious how much damage that's going to do to the Corviknight. I would imagine, maybe about half of its HP. But Rillaboom, the only damage it can do to Corviknight is grass moves that are 4 times resisted. Indeedee, of course, coming right back onto the field. At low HP, a chance for Luke, if he was able to call the switch in there, to pick off the Indeedee and gain terrain control for the back half of this game. But importantly here, too, for this Corviknight, while we're counting its boosts, getting the special defense boost from the Psychic Seed, making its future power trips just a little bit stronger.
So the Terrastellar Close Combat does a considerable amount of this Corviknight's health, more than 75%. And a high horsepower going into the Indeedee is still not enough. So Corviknight's Brave Bird is just going to fire off here and take out Sneasler and just take a little bit of chip damage for its troubles.
Yeah, that's a much stronger close combat than I expected coming out from Sneasler, and that's great for Luke, especially because Corviknight did not click Roost or Bulk Up on that turn. No extra boost from the Corviknight, very, very low HP, and now you can bring out something like that Electabuzz right back onto the field, has the spread Electroweb, which should be more than enough to deal with this Corviknight, even if it wants to Terrastallize into a Dragon type to resist that electric move.
Yeah, so I think Corviknight still having access to that Terra Dragon means it's not necessarily threatened by this Electabuzz to be KO'd this turn. There is a possibility that Electroweb plus something like a high horsepower from Rillaboom would be able to KO it after the Terra Dragon, but we actually just see Milotic come in here.
I would think that an Electroweb is going to do 31 HP to even a Corviknight that's... Well, I know it does have the +1 special defense from the Psychic Seed. I think I would be curious to see. Either way, I'm also curious to see how these Pokemon are trained in their speed. The Milotic and the Corviknight specifically, which one is going to move first on this turn? Because again, you do still threaten, if both of your Pokemon are faster for Luke's side, you do still threaten just taking 2 KOs this turn. I was thinking that the high horsepower into the Indeedee switch in that last turn was not the greatest because you weren't able to pick up the KO on the Indeedee, but if both of your Pokemon this turn are still faster, you put yourself in a phenomenal position here to just take 2 KOs and force an endgame right here.
Yeah. So we are going to see the Terastallization on the Corviknight, going for that Terra Dragon, possibly thinking, okay, if this Milotic goes for a Scald here, I will be able to potentially avoid a knockout. But if Luke calls this and goes for an Ice Beam, thinking, okay, from this range, Corviknight's probably going to go down to an Ice Beam anyways, would be the smart play.
Yes, I think the Ice Beam should be the play here from this Milotic, but the Milotic actually faster than the Rillaboom anyway is going to pick up the KO on Indeedee. Now it's all up to what this Rillaboom does, and if it has enough with this Wood Hammer, no longer boosted by the grassy terrain, no boosting item on this Rillaboom, but still a 120 base power attack, more than enough to knock out this Corviknight that honestly made itself just weaker to this Wood Hammer by Terastallizing, now only normally resisting the move as opposed to resisting it doubly.
Yeah, so I think Brian making the smart play there, going for the Terra Dragon, but getting caught off by Luke's speed tiers here. Milotic naturally slower than Rillaboom, and Rillaboom generally runs a bit of speed, whereas Milotic really wants to improve its bulk and special attack. So I think Brian got a lot of information out of that turn. And, you know, he's not out of this game yet. There is the Sneasler on the field now. There is Delphox, which can just click Expanding Force now. And could pick off a KO on this Milotic with the Expanding Force plus the close combat. So Brian thinking, okay, if I can save my Corviknight on this turn, great. If not, I can actually still win with my 2 Pokemon in the back that are relatively healthy. I mean, I think the Delphox has only taken a Life Orb recoil, and we're just seeing the Sneasler now. So the Electabuzz in the back, not really able to switch in. Maybe wants to reset terrain so he can get Rillaboom out. That would be what I would probably do, such that you can use the priority to your advantage. But neither of these targets taking super effective damage from a Grassy Glide does make it a hard call.
Yeah, it's a difficult matchup for the Rillaboom because of the Pokemon that Brian brought. Didn't bring the Sand mode, and instead brought 3 Pokemon that resist Grass-type moves, and an Indeedee that's going to override its terrain.
Yeah.
We are seeing, though, the close combat going into this Milotic, and likely an Expanding Force on this turn. Electabuzz should be able to take that pretty handily. It came in, back in at full HP. So you do still have now, this turn, your Electabuzz to redirect at least one attack. We got confirmation just on Brian's side that the Sneasler is faster than the Delphox. No speed shenanigans happening there at the very least. But interesting to see how much damage a Milotic might take from something like a single target Expanding Force if a close combat is enough to knock out this Electabuzz here.
Yeah, so what I failed to mention is that Rillaboom coming back in and setting up terrain isn't necessarily for itself, but rather to get rid of the psychic terrain for Delphox, crucially. The other thing here is Luke probably wanted his Electabuzz to go down that turn. You want that Rillaboom back in for free so Milotic can start doing what it does best, but an Expanding Force plus a close combat probably going to do enough into Milotic. But had a Follow Me been clicked there, Sneasler would have been the Pokemon that would have been redirected, so maybe would have been a good thing to do. However, we do see Rillaboom come in here, gonna make it so that Expanding Force will not hit both targets. And Electabuzz just goes for a Protect.
Interesting. I do like this play from Luke. If he can catch the close combat going into this Electabuzz slot, it's very unlikely this turn that Delphox is going to click a fire move because of the Delphox on the other side. It does, though, trying to catch this Rillaboom coming back into the turn, and it should be more than enough to knock out the Rillaboom. We are now, though, in that position that you were talking about, Jake, where you now have Grassy Terrain up and Redirection at the same time. Now you are in a place where your Milotic can get a lot of value out of being next to this Electabuzz.
Yeah, I'm questioning the close combat call into Electabuzz there, especially after my Milotic had just clicked Protect. It would have been very free close combat into that slot. And, had Milotic stayed in there and eaten a Heat Wave and a close combat that didn't target into it, Milotic easily could have gone ahead in this game.
Completely flipped this game. I think Brian is still quite ahead, though. You do now have a safe close combat into that Electabuzz slot. No Terastallization available for either of our 2 players right now. So the close combat should be enough to deal with this Electabuzz. And the Delphox, I was going to say, can just start launching attacks. Trying to protect here to survive another turn. I would think, though, Luke's win con at this point is trying to get a Scald Burn onto this Sneasler just to try to start taking it out. The Dire Claw, though, not enough to KO this Electabuzz, and getting Static instead could be very big, as Electabuzz now likely the fastest thing on the field, unless this Delphox is trained to be very speedy and the Electabuzz is not. And we are going to see, actually, the Delphox is faster than the Electabuzz because it was able to heal with the Grassy Terrain before that Pokemon.
Yeah, so Electabuzz's contact ability coming in clutch here, going to slow down that Sneasler. I don't know if it's used close combat in this game yet to proc its White Herb. I do not remember. So Unburden not going to be active if you are correct here, which I believe you. And had that been something like an Electro Web that turn, I mean, it could have been a completely different game where Brian's on the back foot in terms of speed, even without that static. So Milotic looking to be in a primed position to win this one.
Yeah, Milotic looking very good. It still will be a Follow Me from Electabuzz. I don't know how necessary that is, with a likely Heat Wave coming out this turn. Just the spread move, try to get some extra damage. A burn on Milotic here would be phenomenal. To try to offset the Grassy Terrain recovery. But Milotic now, we are going to see, is moving before this paralyzed Sneasler, and will just take out this Delphox now we're seeing the 1v1, the Sneasler against this Milotic, and Sneasler will have to keep fighting through Paralysis after it procs its own Unburden with this close combat.
So a very wise play from Brian there. I think a lot of players would have been tempted to go for Dire Claw and say, oh, I need to get out of this scenario. I need to roll the dice a bit. But Brian saying, you know what, actually, let me proc my Unburden and give myself a 75% win condition here. But other than a Dire Claw, which might have had, I don't want to do the math, but a much lower percentage. So close combat being a very, very wise call there from Brian. And he is able to direly claw that one back a little bit. Sorry.
No, Jake, I love that. And yes, there are a lot of different decisions that could have been made, I think we can say, for both of those players. You know, one key one that we saw, you know, bear out in that endgame is could have been a Scald into that Sneasler when this Delphox was targeted on that last turn with Milotic. That would have just won the game.
Yep.
You know, you Scald into the Sneasler, it had already taken so much HP loss at that point that the Scald will pick it up, even without the special defense drop from the close combat. Now you're looking at a Delphox against a Milotic 1v1. Outside of Psychic Terrain, you're just going to be able to Scald.
Yeah.
From Luke's side, of course, it's always risky. You had just seen Brian protect the Delphox in an earlier turn. You know, he's shown that he's willing to play those, you know, self-preservation kind of mini games within the game. So, you know, those calls can go both ways. I'm very excited to see, though, what the adaptations are from Luke on how he's going to approach this game, knowing that the Sand mode may not be coming once again.
Yeah, so I want to go back to the two turns that I think we called out where there were big pivotal moments. One was that Scald not going into the Sneasler. I absolutely agree. Had it gone into the Sneasler, and I mean, Sneasler at that point only had a 75% chance to protect thanks to the static, but even if it had gotten the protect off, Delphox isn't doing a lot of damage to a Milotic. It's so specially bulky. And the other turn that we want to shout out, or I would like to shout out, I think we should shout out, is the Sneasler's close combat into the Electabuzz instead of the Milotic that had gone for the protect on the turn prior. I think both players let the other one get back into the game. You know, when you watch chess online, there's a bar where it predicts who's most likely to win. And I think we saw that one shift up and down right in those key moments. And had those not have been mistakes, I mean, I think it could have been a quicker one for Brian.
Oh, yeah. I think Brian could have absolutely won that game a little bit sooner had he, you know, gotten a few more turns right. We are now seeing, though, Game 2 leads, and is this just the same leads? I can't remember exactly what Luke had led in Game 1, but I believe it's the same. The Sneasler and Electabuzz staring down, of course, the Psyspam sisters.
Yeah, bold not to bring the Sand Brothers to this one after you see this lead. Maybe expecting Brian to play more adaptively, but Luke is saying, nah, you know, I handled it a bit last game. I think I can do it again.
Yeah, and we are going to see a slightly different play here from Brian, and I'm excited to see Luke's counter to this, because you know, whenever you are staring down an Indeedee and a Delphox, there are a million things they could do. Both these Pokemon could Terra, you could Follow Me, you can Helping Hand, you can attack with, you know, Psychic, Fire, Fighting. The Indeedee may have, no, it does not have a Fairy move, but all different kinds of type coverage. Luke, though, playing this one pretty straightforward, bringing Rillaboom out for this Electabuzz, but we did see a very different play from Brian's side. This Indeedee, he did lock in the Fairy Terastallization on there, calling, once again, this Terra Dark Throat Chop from Sneasler. Terastallization coming out here early. And this will be the Sneasler. It's going to go Terra Stellar once again. I was thinking, you know, Luke maybe has this, you know, maybe has the room to play a little bit more safely here in Game 2. You can protect to start scouting out what your opponent's going to try to do. The Indeedee on the other side does not have Protect, so you know, you'd have a free Fake Out into that slot at the very least on the next turn. But instead, double Terastallization on turn 1 here. And it's really going to come down to what move the Sneasler locked in.
Yeah, absolutely. If this is somehow a Dire Claw, this is just going to be a one-hit KO. As we are going to see a Throat Chop going into that Indeedee thanks to Follow Me. Not even going to do close to enough damage there, as Delphox is just going to launch an Expanding Force. Not so expanded this time, but Sneasler is down off the field. And a Pokemon that can make a lot of impact in a game because down turn 1. And not only that, but your big resource of Terra gone as well.
Yeah, I think it's a very aggressive turn from Luke, trying to call out basically the same thing that Brian did in Game 1, which was not terastallize either of the Psychic types and allow a Terra Dark Throat Chop to come out, I don't know how wise that kind of play is. Both of these Pokemon can terastallize into types that resist Dark, and the Delphox, the primary damage dealer, can still protect on this turn too. So regardless of which slot you attack into, there are always going to be risks. The Rillaboom coming out though, you do at least set up your own terrain. You have Milotic now in front of these two special attackers. A pretty solid position for the Milotic to be in at the very least, but you're already, just like you had mentioned, Jake, so far behind in resources in this game that whatever Brian has in the back, if it's that Sneasler once again, could pose another very big issue.
Yeah, I just don't see where Luke has a ton of offense here. There's the Milotic, which is a bulky offense, Rillaboom, which is a good offensive tool, albeit a support, and Electabuzz, which is pure support. I just don't know if there's a lot of gas in the tank for Luke to be able to do enough damage into Brian's Pokemon here.
Yeah, you do get the Fake Out into the Indeedee this turn. Nothing going to happen on that side of the field at least. And again, seeing that the Milotic is faster than the opposing Indeedee after the Milotic went before the Indeedee flinched, so you at least have that knowledge in your back pocket. And yes, the Delphox now doesn't threaten any KOs this turn. The Rillaboom, at least this game too, didn't take a Heat Wave on the switch in, so a very healthy Rillaboom. I just don't know if it's going to be enough, again, depending on what is in the back for Brian here.
Yeah, I think bringing in Rillaboom, yeah, it's smart to prevent the Psychic terrain, but maybe a bit premature thinking, I can get my Grassy Seed up and be faster with Sneasler, but not really that important, maybe just a little unnecessary. And again, I'm shocked not to have seen Tyranitar at the very least come to this game.
From Brian's side.
For Brian?
Brian has the Tyranitar. Yes,
right. Sorry.
For Luke could have had the Incineroar or the Vivillon.
Thank you.
We didn't see either of those Pokemon. The Incineroar, a Pokemon that loves to see this Delphox, especially if the Delphox cannot terastallize. As Rillaboom's going to get a critical hit with that high horsepower, based on the damage it did in Game 1, I think that critical hit does matter.
Yes.
I don't believe that would have knocked it out without that. So at least the KO here, Grassy Terrain is going to be up for the rest of this game, or at least for the next 3 turns until it expires. But yes, it's going to be just the same 4 Pokemon for both of these trainers. The Corviknight coming out here, and then the Sneasler coming out here rather, and the Corviknight safely in the back to deal with this Rillaboom, if we get to that situation.
Yeah. So now at a point where I'm not sure how much damage Brian can do to this Milotic. We see. We saw Corviknight in the back. We see Sneasler now. Going to be able to do plenty of damage to that Milotic. I don't know where I am right now. I think Brian's looking clean to take this one, really primed. Doesn't really have to worry about Rillaboom with that Corviknight in the back. Not threatening Sneasler, not threatening Delphox. Can probably just launch damage into the Milotic here, or even calling a Protect, maybe just wants to go directly into the Electabuzz.
Yeah, of course, the Rillaboom slot, the one Pokemon on that side of the field that couldn't protect. Of course, just playing it pretty safely here. This Fake Out into the Milotic, and then a Heat Wave coming out from this Delphox. If it connects, we'll do some pretty decent damage into this Electabuzz. Though, of course, we will have to see how well this Electabuzz can start taking some more hits. It's going to have to start soaking up some hits from the Sneasler, and for Luke, may also need another static activation in order to flip things into your favor in this game as well.
Yeah. I think probably just having to go all-in offensive on the Electabuzz. It wouldn't hurt to just go into Milotic as it had just protected, but Electabuzz is the one thing I think standing in the way of Corviknight really just rolling through, especially now that Brian doesn't have his Terra on the table.
Yes. Yeah, the Electabuzz is a little bit spooky for that Corviknight, although the Electro Web drops will just be reflected right back with the Mirror Arbor, so Corviknight at least doesn't have to worry about being slower than the other Pokemon on the field. Brian, though, deciding just going to try to play it out with the Pokemon in front of him. Delphox will protect here, once again trying to catch a Scald going into that slot, the super effective attack, while the Sneasler will click in close combat. It goes into this Electabuzz. Will it hang on? And it will. I believe the static activation would come after the stat drop, so Still unsure yet if we're going to see that, but no static activation. Scald comes out. Not enough to KO Sneasler, but it does get the burn. Yep. A 51% chance for one of those two statuses to activate, two 30% chances. That's a very, very big burn. Now, your Milotic is looking extremely strong all of a sudden now that the Sneasler can't damage it.
Yeah. I mean, it was already looking very, very good with the Follow Me, but the fact that this Sneasler has been drastically neutered in the offense department, you know, maybe you would have been able to protect the Sneasler this coming turn or switch it out, let Delphox pick up the Electabuzz, get Sneasler into a spot where it could take out this Milotic. No longer going to be the case at all.
Yeah, and now Brian using the Sneasler a little bit differently than how he had been. I'm very excited to see this turn on what this coaching that the Sneasler went for the effect that it might have on that Delphox. Look, you know, could be looking to just give it a little bit more insurance against this high horsepower Rillaboom. But instead, the coaching is going to go into this Corviknight that's switching right in and immediately going to start boosting that thing up for its potential power trips, its best way to damage this Milotic.
Yeah, so coaching a move that cannot be redirected, it always targets the side of it. It cannot be redirected into that Follow Me. So Corviknight getting this boost, I think Brian stepping on the gas, knowing he's going to lose the Sneasler this turn, and it's not going to be very, very impactful. Very, very wise to go for that, saying, okay, I need something that can immediately threaten my Milotic when it comes in, and this is the exact thing that can do it, is a +1 Corviknight, a Delphox that's presumably faster than this Electabuzz I think we saw, and a Heat Wave we saw the spread damage not do enough to maybe pick up Electabuzz from here, but an Expanding Force very well could. I think my Milotic's in a spot where it has to switch into Rillaboom to get the healing on the Electabuzz, as well as threaten a Fake Out next turn. But afraid of this Corviknight's +1 Brave Bird that can easily just target it down.
Yes, I would think, if I were in Luke's position, I would think very heavily about switching the Electabuzz out into this Rillaboom and trying to protect my Milotic. You set up the grassy terrain for yourself. Of course, the Corviknight, because it can't Terrasilize, not able to get any of that grassy terrain recovery. But most importantly, like you mentioned, Jake, giving yourself a Fake Out turn on this field, because this Corviknight cannot protect. Instead, it's going to be the Follow Me that's going to redirect this Expanding Force. It should be more than enough to deal with this Electabuzz. And now, curious to see it, you know, once again, the speed tiers here, you would imagine that's Milotic, because it was faster than the Indeedee, is going to be faster than this Corviknight, and will take out Delphox, turning this into a 2v1. And Corviknight here, how much damage are we going to get out of this +1 Brave Bird into Milotic? And it is a lot.
Not enough, unfortunately. And now Luke's in a decent position still, right? This Corviknight does not have its Psychic Seed boost. It does have a boost from the coaching, but it doesn't have Protect. So a Rillaboom Fake Out and Milotic having an effective 51% chance to burn it with back-to-back Scalds is very, very, well, not very in Luke's favor, 1% in Luke's favor. But the damage, more than anything, is what's important. I think 2 Scalds could very well pick up the KO. We're looking for about 70 damage, and that's more than enough for a 2-hit KO, as Milotic's faster, and there's no question about it. This Milotic is going to be able to take out Corviknight in this next turn, and Luke is going to bring it back to a 1-1 position.
Wow, an incredible comeback for the Milotic there. I mean, I think you and I both were not essentially writing off Luke's chances in this game, but you know, it seemed very much in Brian's favor as we were going through that mid-game, but an impressive turnaround from that Milotic, really centering on the Scald burn on that Sneasler, essentially forcing that Pokemon out of the game.
Yeah.
You know, Brian had decided that the Sneasler no longer can do that much damage. Instead, we'll use it just as the coaching bot next to the Corviknight. Of course, to Luke's credit, was able to target those Scalds very well to get to that position where you can just Fake Out Scald plus Scald into the Corviknight at the end game, just knock out everything around it. Really, though, it seems like Luke does need some of those turns to go his way, whether that's the static activation from the Electabuzz, the Scald burns on this Sneasler. I would be very interested in seeing this Incineroar come from Luke's side to help deal with a lot of the Pokemon that Brian is bringing.
Yeah, without question. I think Incineroar is the Pokemon to bring here. We've seen Sneasler try to do something and not really get much out. I would be hard-pressed to not see this Incineroar lead instead of the Sneasler.
I would love to see the Incineroar lead instead of the Sneasler. Number one, you force that Delphox. If it wants to hit the Incineroar, it has to Terastallize.
Yep.
And forcing that resource onto your opponent, knowing where that's going to be allocated, is a huge information and a huge game planning tool that you can use now if you're Luke's side, having that Delphox use the Terastallization. The other thing is that the fighting Terra really isn't that great outside of the Incineroar. That's really the only thing it's for. You're now neutral to the Rillaboom's Wood Hammers. The Rillaboom wants to come in on the Delphox with Psychic Terrain up pretty often.
Yep.
You now, yes, you are no longer weak to the Scalds from Milotic,
Yep.
but 2 Scalds is still more than enough, and you're still not doing that much damage back to it. And the Incineroar, depending on how the Incineroar is trained, your Terra fighting Terra Blast, even with Life Orb, is not guaranteed to pick up that one-hit KO.
And we actually do see a lead switch up, but I don't think it's what either of us were expecting, as we just see Indeedee and Delphox lead again on Brian's side, but we see the beautiful Vivillon and the beautiful Milotic on Luke's side.
I don't hate it. I'm coming back around on it. I'm pretty excited now to see what this Vivillon can do, primarily because of the Compound Eyes and the combination of Tailwind and Sleep Powder. The Vivillon likely slower than the Delphox, but can turn around those speed tiers with a Tailwind and then start threatening Sleep Powder. From what we've seen, yes, there are safety goggles on this Indeedee. That's very scary. But that's the only Pokemon on Luke's or on Brian's side that he can use to be immune to those Sleep Powders. It forces Indeedee essentially to stay on the field in front of this Vivillon, allowing something like this Rillaboom to come in and overwrite terrain immediately.
Yeah, still, again, shocked not to see Incineroar lead here. Had this been something like Incineroar Vivillon, oh my goodness, I think Luke would be in such an advantageous position, it would be crazy. But we actually see a Terra Water offensive Terra from Milotic, wanting to get possibly these 2-hit KOs on the Indeedee with 2 Scalds, I think very, very wisely. As a Heat Wave comes out, going to knock Vivillon down to its Focus Sash. Without a burn, Vivillon is going to stay around for next turn, and do an amount of damage to Milotic, but more of that Life Orb. Chip, Sleep Powder going right into the safety goggles of Indeedee, as a Scald from Milotic is likely going to do over half to this Indeedee.
Wow. That's very sizable damage from the Scald, and getting the burn should be more than enough to be a 2-hit KO there because of that Terra Water. I am curious to see why there was not a Tailwind that turn from Luke's side. I think that would have been a very strong play to put yourself in a good position there. Now, having your Vivillon and your Milotic be faster than the Delphox. Of course, it's a scary position to be in, though, because the Indeedee on the other side could have just clicked Trick Room immediately. It's difficult to call those kinds of turns. So Luke, thinking that there's a chance the Indeedee clicks Trick Room, trying to Sleep Powder into this Delphox, and instead Brian just getting that turn right. But even with getting the turn right from Brian's side, it's not all peachy. You still have to contend with this Terra Water Milotic that threatens a knockout onto both of your Pokemon, and this Vivillon that's protecting right in front of you. No switches. Looks like Milotic's just going to take a KO this turn.
Yeah, I'm shocked to have not seen Tailwind. Had that been a Tailwind, Milotic would have been in a position where, with a Hurricane from Vivillon that next turn, would have been able to pick up 2 knockouts here so long as Hurricane hits. It's 91% of the time. As we see a huge amount of damage from the Expanding Force here, and a Scald going to be redirected into that Follow Me. Had that just been a Helping Hand, I think that would have been 2 KOs.
I think so. The Expanding Force doing significantly more damage than that Heat Wave did. And we are going to see now, like you've been calling out all set long, this Sand duo coming back in, or at least seeing the Tyranitar for now, onto the field on Brian's side. Now you've got now you have something to deal with if you're Luke. This Vivillon at 1 HP is not long for this world because of that Sandstorm damage at the end of this turn. The Milotic, slower than the Delphox, threatened. Even if Psychic Terrain is overwritten by this Rillaboom, I would imagine a single target Expanding Force should be more than enough to deal with this Milotic. No switches from Luke's side this turn, and we are just going to see the Terastallization committed immediately onto the Tyranitar. That Terra flying, getting away from the water weakness, and I think we did see the Terra Blast locked in to that Vivillon slot.
So Milotic just going for a Protect here, I think pretty wise, knowing that you need to preserve Milotic and let Vivian just get knocked out this turn to bring a free switch into probably Rillaboom to get a fake out if I were a betting man, I say all the time. And I think that's a very wise play from Luke. I'm still going back and replaying that turn 1 where there was just no Tailwind. Had that been a Tailwind, I think this game would be so much different.
Oh, this game is very much in Luke's favor if he does get Tailwind up immediately because of the Follow Me from Indeedee. Again, the Indeedee does still threaten the Trick Room on that turn. You know, it's not the freest play in the world. Now, though, I would expect this Rillaboom to come out. You have a Fake Out threatened into this Delphox. There's no more Psychic Terrain available for Brian's side because the Indeedee is fainted. And once again, you may just have to get a Scald Burn on this physical attacker, this time being the Tyranitar, as Rillaboom comes in. You know, depending on what is the last Pokemon for Luke. If we do have this Incineroar, that's another Pokemon that could be very threatening to this Tyranitar. Something like the Sneasler in the back, too, could be very exciting as well, just in the speed that it gives you. You know, to deal with potential Excadrill on the other side, you get the Grassy Seed to unburden, you'd still be faster with the Sneasler. Really interested to see, though, how much damage a Terra Water Scald can do to a Terra Flying Tyranitar that still does have its Assault Vest.
Yeah, and just a reminder, this Milotic actually not carrying Recover, so not in a position where it can just get its HP back with a Fake Out into the Delphox. Actually carrying Haze in that slot and Protect, as we've seen in this set. So Protect going into Delphox here, I think Smart is not wanting to take the Fake Out damage. As an Ice Beam going into this Tyranitar is not going to do nearly enough damage with that Assault Vest, and a high horsepower going into the Delphox not going to be enough either, thanks to that Protect, as Knockoff going into the Milotic is going to finish it off. And now a very, very healthy Rillaboom and whatever Luke has in the back are going to have to finish this one up for him. If it's an Incineroar, I can see this one being clawed back ever so slightly. If it's that Electabuzz or that Sneasler, I do not see a way for this one to happen.
I think a Sneasler could come out. The difficult part is that you no longer have Terastallization on your side. So you don't have an option to get away from your weaknesses to the attacks. Well, at the Sneasler's Terra Stellar anyway. You don't have an option to get rid of any weaknesses here. Both of the Pokemon on Brian's side threaten a one-hit KO onto the Sneasler. The Terra Flying Terra Blast from this Tyranitar, even with the +1 defense from the Grassy Seed, I would imagine should be more than enough to deal with this Sneasler. And of course the Delphox with its Psychic Expanding Force. Again, the 4x super effective. We saw it pick up a one-hit KO in turn 1 of game 2. If you are Luke, it's either getting some Dire Claw activations or really getting some Protect turns correct. For Brian, switching out Delphox here, I think, is taking your foot off the gas just a little bit too much. You put yourself in a position now where if a Sneasler clicks Dire Claw into this Tyranitar, maybe it's enough damage to pick up the knockout, but maybe it's also... Okay, the poison is the status that you can kind of deal with the most. I was thinking potentially a sleep or a paralysis could just be game losing at that point.
Yeah, I think, Brian, I agree with you there indubitably that taking the foot off the gas there in that switch is odd. But Delphox would have had to deal with potential Heat Wave hitting. So that position is a little iffy. But I think Brian thinking maybe, okay, I have Sand Up, I should probably take advantage of it. And not thinking, okay, I have 2 Pokemon on the field that I need to KO. Let me handle that. So Brian taking the foot off the gas, but I don't think it's the end of the world so long as he can hit his moves.
That is the most important thing here. The Excadrill will be clicking Iron Head in this endgame. Don't have to worry about the accuracy check there. It is really just, the 2 things are, 1, does Delphox protect this turn? Because if Delphox protects this turn and a high horsepower goes into that slot, you gave yourself another opportunity to click Iron Head into Rillaboom, and an Iron Head plus a single target Heat Wave should be enough to deal with Rillaboom, plenty. The Heat Wave does come out and it does connect though, and that will take care of Rillaboom. If the Heat Wave had missed, I think things get very interesting. But Brian McQueen winning round 3 just by the skin of his teeth in a matchup that, I think that chess analogy was great earlier, Jake. We saw the win probability of this match go all over the place throughout all 3 of those games.
Definitely, and I think a lot of that leaned on the Pokemon that Luke brought, I really want to emphasize how good Incineroar was in that matchup. Intimidate for Excadrill, Intimidate for Tyranitar. Super effective into Corviknight and can fake it out. Yes, you have to deal with Mirror Armor for Intimidate. Dark typing for Psyspam, and even Intimidate for Indeedee. I think it would have procced the Whiter, but you can just kind of cycle that out. I think not bringing in Incineroar there was, to bring up a chessism, a huge blunder. I think Incineroar would have been, pun intended, pivotal to a win here, but not bringing it really a confusing call.
That being said, I was really impressed by the work that Milotic was able to put in all three of those games. These Terra Water Scalds, the damage that they was able to do to the Indeedee, yes, it's not Psychic Seed Indeedee, it doesn't have the +1 in special defense, but you were doing about 100 damage to that Pokemon. Yeah. That's not nothing. No. Especially for a Pokemon like Milotic that is traditionally, a very bulky, balance, kind of just sit on the field and start spreading status kind of Pokemon. And with how fast it was, being faster than this Tyranitar, being faster than the Indeedee, was very, very important for Luke's side. So big props to that Milotic. Yeah. Just wasn't quite enough to carry through to beat every single Pokemon on Brian's side by itself.
Yeah. I think Brian definitely played well to win that one. I don't think the matchup was really in his favor, but played it well to win.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a great set, phenomenal. Brian now, believe 2-1 record,
yes.
If not 3. Yeah, I believe 2-1. I think both those players were 1-1 going to that round. So in a great position to advance on a top cut. We do still have, though, one more round of Swiss. Will come up right after this short break.